So in peace, and feel free to ask questions, there is no conflict in peace. We're talking about peace from Hawkins' map of consciousness. So it's around the level of 600. So it's at the level of enlightenment or thereabouts, even though I think some of this is dualistic. Okay, so there's no conflict, there's no negativity, there's lovingness, there's timelessness in this state, experience of completion, stillness, oneness, unity and freedom. The peace is imperturbable, actions occur effortlessly and spontaneously and are loving. The inner self prevails and the small self has been transcended. Now, for normal people, we've all sort of had glimpses of this. So it's moments of timelessness and stillness and beauty that we've experienced. And I was coming in with Anna today, who was admiring the plants, the stunning beauty of the plants. And I slip into that as well at times. It's like suddenly I look at the sky and it's like all time stops. And it's like the beauty of God shines forth in an amazingly, it's like the beauty is so stunning that the mind stops. Now there have been a lot of near-death experiences, and authors who've had these near-death experiences are often transformed in their nature. Definitely in my white lights, even though it wasn't quite it wasn't from a near-death thing, but it was from meeting Muji, the teacher of enlightenment, with his self-inquiry that I had my white light spiritual experience. Also interestingly, with kinesiology or muscle testing, when someone is at this state, their muscles don't go weak. So they just are strong with everything. It was quite interesting with Hawkins, because nothing makes him go weak, but he does do kinesiology, but he has to use Susan's arm to check, because if they would test it on him, nothing would make him go weak.
Okay.
And that's what they found, but that's how I guess Hawkins was guided to it. He was really into kinesiology, and he would do this is on the one of his tapes. He would do the kinesiology, and then and he had these traditional things. I think his two traditional tests to check kinesiology and show the power of kinesiology. He would get people to hold what was it? One of them was to look at fluorescent lighting. So he'd get the audience members, and he would check them out. He said, look at the fluorescent lighting, and he'd check their arm strength, and they would go weak. And I'm guessing, because for most humans, when they look at fluorescent lighting, their muscles go weak when you check them with kinesiology. And then one day, he got some volunteers up, and they wouldn't go weak when they were looking at the thing. And then he realized that they were doing A Course in Miracles, and they had got to lesson 78 in A Course in Miracles, and they stopped going weak to fluorescent lighting. So for me, that was then the thing of, and I think probably they were his own Course in Miracles students, because he was a Course in Miracles teacher at the time. So I think that might have had a quick impact on how quickly they became immune, having Hawkins as their Course in Miracles teacher. But yeah, they wouldn't go weak, and you start to become immune to external stimuli with kinesiology. So when you get to very high levels, very less and less things make you go weak. You're no longer buying in to external things. There is no identification with the body when you get to 600. Like I shared before, with Hawkins in the beginning, like people would talk to his body, and it took him a while to realize that they thought he was the body, because it was like his consciousness was the whole room. So he had to readjust and then realize that people were talking to his body, realizing that and that's how, so he could relate to them and sort of make an approximation of a human being talking back to them. realizing that they thought he was the body and stuck in the body. In this state, suffering is impossible. If you don't have an I, you can't suffer in that state. You need an I to suffer. I suffer my feelings. I suffer. I suffer the weather. You know, I suffer. I suffer from a busy head. So there is an I. But if there's no identification with thoughts or of an I-ness or the location or identity, then suffering can't exist. That's all I can say on that. Or do you
What's
want
the purpose of this blissful experience?
What is the purpose? What is the purpose of this? My own view on that, my own view on that, personal view on that is, it's like this. This place is like a opportunity. This incarnation is an opportunity to transcend the ego and to realize the truth. So everything, and the way I sort of see it is like all the thought patterns that I'm holding in mind, you could say they're dualistic in nature. So opportunities are given, are all manifest to help me to resolve those. At the level of, once I resolve those patterns, they no longer bind me to the world. And then I start to experience greater expanded levels of consciousness. The lower levels, as you start letting go, you might be stuck in fear and excessive thinking. As I do either general spiritual work or self-inquiry, then it seems to be more expanded. You might get up to levels of okayness and do more spiritual work. You may get up to neutrality, do more spiritual work. And there's less and less thoughts. The feelings get less and less negative. The consciousness gets expanded as one is resolving. But essentially, for me, it's like there's two aspects as I see it. One is suppressed feelings that need to be let go of, and the other is to resolve the thought patterns as well. So if I can share again, I went to see Mooji. I went to see Mooji. And this also correlates with the map of consciousness. I'm coming back to what do I see the purpose. So he asked me, what am I? And I said, the best I could get to is that I experience like there's a kind of a witnessing when I do the self-inquiry technique that seems to be observing. And then he asked me, is there somebody behind that, somebody looking behind the observer? And when he said that, it's like what happened was that there was immense power, light, and love. There was no world. It was just like intense love and light. There was not any thought there. There was nothing there, and the intensity of the love and the power was in another dimension to anything that had been experienced before. The Course in Miracles has a lovely phrase in it. When I read it, it said like, it'll be like 10,000 times more than anything experienced in this world. So it was like that level of power, light and love. No thinking, no thought, nothing. And what happened then seemed to be something like a thought, which then disappeared, and then another thought, and somehow there was a latching onto that thought. And then in that, it seemed like suddenly the world came back, and I was in front of Mooji. But there was an overwhelming sense of bliss, and everything was just radiantly beautiful. Mooji more or less told me to leave the place, and just it was an autumn day, but it seemed like everything was just exquisitely beautiful and radiant and stunningly beautiful.
Would you like to be in that state all the time?
Pardon?
Would you not like to be in that state all the time?
I think that is one of the things with people who experience that, is there's a great desire to return there.
But really there is no evidence that anybody does stay in that state all the time. Well,
I would say my view on that is, if you go into that state, you may well no longer be in the body.
So you will have no experience.
So there would be, oh, I see what you're saying, yes, yeah. So there would be no experience,
Of
yes.
this bliss.
Of this bliss, yeah. There would, say again?
No experience of the bliss, there will be nothing.
If they remained there, yes, yeah. I think if you, in that dimension, there is no I, there is no thought, there is no world, there was nothing. If that remained for me, if the ego didn't restart itself, then that would be, yeah, that would be that. But my ego restarted, so I have a sense of I.
So what are you seeking?
What do I seek?
You don't want to be back in that state all the time.
Yes, well, there's an I now, yes, there's an I. I self-inquire, I do spiritual work, I do the Course in Miracles to help loosen the grip of identification with thoughts and also attachment to this world. So that is, you could say the I is doing it, or that is spontaneously happening naturally every day in a non-dualistic fashion, while it's still, there is like an inner happening of doing self-inquiry, doing certain spiritual practices. And for me, is it the I that is doing that? I wouldn't say necessarily. It's just, on a certain level, it seems to be like there's an I that self-inquires from time to time. There's an I that sometimes does spiritual lessons or attends spiritual groups. But also there's something else happening as well. So it seems there's a grace also occurring to release any vestiges of attachment or identification or anything that's going on. And I think that I'm pretty certain, it sounds like there's an I speaking, I'm pretty certain the direction is returning there while this
Right, but like this, if somebody gave you the opportunity to be in that state all the time right now, would you take it?
Would I take it? Yes. Can you do that for me?
So you have to just go.
Yes. No. Well, that's a very, very good question. Some thoughts from the ego may arise. Okay, that's a good question. That's a good question. Okay, so what happened? Okay, I'll share another experience. Very, very early on, myself and I had two other friends who were spiritual seekers, very strong spiritual seekers. We were all interested in enlightenment. And we all went, actually the three of us went to see Dr. Hawkins in Sedona, and also I introduced them to Muji and self-inquiry, and we loved watching, and in an office we started a spiritual group, and I said, oh, I've got a Muji DVD, let's all watch it together, you know, while he was going. And it's one of his good DVDs on self-inquiry, where he's basically saying, okay, like chop everything off, let go of everything, let go of your body, let go of your thoughts, chop, 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 you know. And we were all watching it. And then I would imagine a terror came upon all three of us at the same time, like an extreme terror. And this is how it happened. It happened for all of us at exactly the same time. And what he was talking about was enlightenment, let go of everything right now. You know, we knew that. He was like, and you know, whether you return or not, who knows. And I do seek enlightenment, and the terror came, this was about 10 years ago, this terror came. And a thought came up in consciousness as I faced the terror. It's like, I'm going to lose my ego if I go through this. It'll be lost. And a thought just came up, suddenly it just popped in. It's like, you can't, and I felt like I was going to start bursting out into tears, so don't cry in front of the other two. And it seemed like there was an interest in that thought, and the terror disappeared. And the other two also, there was a man there, and he had a thought related to family, and he picked up that thought regarding family, and it's like the terror stopped for him. And there was a woman there, and she had a thought arise with the terror, and then that feeling of the potential for losing the ego was gone. So yes, my intention is to do it, and if my intention is to do that. If for me, as I understand, this is my view, and I've also experienced it. It's like Hawkins describes it as the final doorway. You feel like the terror, you're going to lose your ego for good if you face this last feeling. And I believe I experienced the gateway once, the fear and the terror. Would I be willing to face it and let it go through that terror? And I refused it on that time 10 years ago. So yes. You know, Hawkins and Muji are my teachers, and that is my one thing in life. I wish to be enlightened. I pray for that. And
can I just ask quickly? You know,
yes.
that terror that
yes.
arises.
Yes.
Is that the death of the ego?
Yes, I believe that is the final terror. The ego believes if you face this last terror, even the life of the ego will be gone. Its existence is gone. And that I knew, Muji was talking about that, and I knew that was the terror that came up at that point. I've not had that terror to face in the last 10 years. If it came up upon me, my intention is to go through it and be done with it. Will I go through that? If you're able to offer it to me, I'll face that. Would I go through it, or would some thought distract me off, and would I somehow chicken out? I don't know, actually. I'm not sure whether the ego would tempt me out. As I understand it, probably like thoughts will come up not to go through and let go of this existence. So that's the acid test. I don't know if that answered the question. Yeah. But I pray for the willingness not to hold on to any thought if that chance presents itself to me again. And I do wish for another chance in this lifetime. Yeah.
Yeah. Not that there is like really an I that has a choice. Say if in this lifetime you sort of aimed for unconditional love.
Yes.
That would be your spiritual goal.
Yeah.
But it's kind of an illusion whether it has a choice about that anyway. But that would be your goal. It's not necessarily like enlightenment is your goal. Even though everyone will eventually become enlightened.
Oh yeah. From Hawkins' teachings, he says there's two things that would be good to work towards. One is either unconditional love or enlightenment. And unconditional love is not everyone is attracted to enlightenment and helpful, and that's fine. But unconditional love is a good one to go. And he says the benefit of that, even though is that you don't necessarily have to come back here, because it's like you gain entry to heaven. Heaven is a dualistic realm. We're still in the realms of duality, but at least you might not have to come back to this realm, being in the heavenly realm. And then from heaven, it's probably a nicer place to try and pursue enlightenment than in this very, very heavy dualistic realm. This one, with a lot of duality, heavy duality here. So also for me that's what Hawkins said. So Christ taught salvation and Buddha taught enlightenment. Now, through the calibration research, both Hawkins and Buddha calibrate at the ultimate level in human consciousness of 1000. However, they taught different things. So Buddha taught let go of all your attachments, and you won't have to reincarnate or come back here again. And then you will reach enlightenment. You never have to experience and reincarnate and experience old age, suffering and death. So he taught the full way, let go of all attachments. Whereas Christ taught, trust in me as your saviour and love your brother as yourself. And for me, and you go to heaven. You go to heaven. And for me, heaven, it calibrates. It's like a realm, but at a very high level vibration. Whereas here you can meet axe murderers outside and saints. You might go out and meet an axe murderer and a saint in the same street. You won't meet axe murderers in heaven because their vibration won't let them be there. So it's very, very good. You can aim for unconditional love is a thing. For people, I'm a food addict myself. I go to 12-step meetings, but for people in 12-step fellowships with addiction problems, that they have to aim at least for unconditional love, or at least be trying to make progress. Otherwise, they'll relapse back into addiction, into cocaine addiction, food addiction, drug addiction, alcohol addiction. So addicts have no choice. They have, as a minimum, we need to work on that, at least to stay abstinent, otherwise we go downhill. But generally, even if you haven't got addiction problems, I think it's a very, very good thing, unconditional love. And there's still an I, but it's focused on loving everyone unconditionally. And it means then, quite possibly, you won't necessarily reincarnate in this realm. You could be off to heaven next, which is still dualistic. There's still an I guess it's like I in my heavenly spiritual body speak to you in your heavenly spiritual body, and have cups of tea and listen to classical music and heaven regularly and talk about enlightenment. But if you reach, definitely maybe in the 200s or 300s, you're just a normal Joe Bloggs, you might be coming back in and have another Joe Bloggs life.
Is the Course in Miracles, because that's more it's about salvation and feels a bit more Christ focused than Buddha?
I would say actually that the lessons are actually for me at the level of 600 enlightenment, which is at that level it is actually it does talk about letting go of all your thoughts and the stillness actually will take you. The Course in Miracles actually will, if you do it with great devotion. The Course in Miracles will take you to enlightenment. Yeah, Christ consciousness. Whereas, so yes, it's at a level of enlightenment. But generally, Christianity, and for me, the message that Christ gave for the people was salvation. Love your body as yourself, trust in me, and you'll go to heaven. But the Course in Miracles, if you practice it, actually it has the power in it to take you to enlightenment and releasing all your thoughts and your attachment to thoughts and to stillness. Whereas something like 12 steps is 12 steps is aiming you at unconditional love. So one of the philosophies in 12 steps, let go of your resentments, pray for others, to treat them with patience, tolerance, kindness and love, be of love and service in all you do, in all affairs, try and be loving in the rooms, try and be loving in your work, try and be loving in your relationships and let go of your resentments. So that is like aiming at unconditional love. Whereas making all your thoughts meaningless, which you might be doing today, and giving, is like, you don't need an ego. You don't need to be engrossed. Yep.
Are Course in Miracles teachers enlightened? Is that not really?
Actually,
That's a good question. But
I guess
I don't know.
it's like contextual.
Yeah.
My experience.
Go on,
I don't think
Anna.
it's necessary. It's not necessary.
Yeah. Okay.
No,
Well,
I just realise it's.
Yeah. Okay. Well, my view is most of them wouldn't be.
no.
Most of them wouldn't be,
So,
and the ones I've heard are heavily dualistic. Heavily dualistic. So my view is the vast majority, and there's so many Course in Miracles teachers everywhere, hundreds and hundreds of them teaching a Course in Miracles, and
but the ones who've got maybe quite a lot of followers would be on a higher.
possibly not necessarily.
Not necessarily, but
not necessarily, because maybe also sometimes. Also as well, high levels of spiritual consciousness don't necessarily mean you speak eloquently. Not necessarily. You might do. You might be able to speak eloquently, but sometimes some people can be at very high levels of consciousness and not very eloquent in communicating. And also most of Europe and the US is very intellectual.
Yeah.
I would say it's got a very, very strong intellect. So anyone who does the Course in Miracles, I would say as well. I mean, it could be they're authentic and are enlightened, but many of them, if they can speak very, very clearly to the ego and are able to describe principles really, really well, they would probably have a very, very large following, not necessarily be enlightened, but they could be very, very useful.
Yeah, because the intellect goes like
499. Yeah, if you had a teacher at 499, or a lot of them might be even in the 500s, but 500 is not necessarily enlightened. So they can be loving, but not necessarily that their consciousness is at the level of non-duality.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, like, I think you will be guided by the teacher or the teachings that are more around your consciousness level. I remember Dr Hawkins saying something about that, because it just taking it to basics, like you're not going to start running if you can't even walk.
Yes.
So it's like step by step, and I think as you start to raise or you'll awaken slowly, then obviously someone else will be beneficial for you, but I think you will know yourself.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's what Hawkins says.
So even though they may not be enlightened, but then they may be benefiting a whole load of others. Because even just like, because obviously I go to church as well, and I don't agree with everything, but then there's a lot of good teachings of like unconditional love, which I can definitely have noticed from first-hand experience. It's helped a lot of people. So I guess it's that vibration. But like I said, I think the 12th step is higher than the church because it's more. Yeah,
from calibrations, from muscle testing, churches on average calibrate around 460, and on average, I mean, 12-step meetings calibrate 540. And from calibration research, some of the sections in the Bible calibrate below 200.
The Old Testament.
The Old Testament, exactly.
I was going to say, just like, I think you mentioned before that it's all in context, like, I think Jesus was obviously teaching at a time where a lot of people were way below 200, so a lot of his teachings had to be like in context of that, not sort of the wider.
Absolutely, I agree. Yes, thanks, Stevie. So it's in context. So Christ, in that period and in the audience he was speaking to be of maximum help to others. I think also teaching enlightenment, they might have crucified him a bit earlier on. As well, it's obvious he's totally vulgar, and we can get him on the cross, we can crucify him a bit quicker. So it's in context what his purpose would be for that. But I think as well, maybe for his disciples, he spoke at a more advanced level than he did to the wider audience. And Buddha, they already were familiar with those kind of teachings, ancient teachings in that place. So to teach full enlightenment, and there wouldn't be a big shock to the populace. And so yes, thanks for sharing that. Okay. And yes, of course, like Anna said, if you're at a low level of consciousness, like calibrating 300, if you get a teacher at like 500, that's probably quite good. To get a teacher at 600, teaching self-inquiry is probably might not be as useful at that point. You see, to be able to relate to it. Okay.
Because I just want to ask something, because I know that sometimes, this was me myself, for example, I wanted to share about self-inquiry like ages ago with certain people, and then I would get really frustrated because out of like my love for them, I wanted them to be able to experience, but then obviously you have to be careful because some people may get offended because it's not like their fault, it's because I guess of the way their mindset is at this present moment and their level of understanding. And I think that's sort of similar, so when people go out and they want to preach like Jesus or I don't know, like a certain belief, and obviously some people can react one way and other people another.
Yes.
But
Yeah, I mean, it's totally understandable. Like, I'm attracted to enlightenment. I don't expect everyone else to be attracted to enlightenment. I mean, it is, just talking about enlightenment, I think for a lot of people, I can understand, it would be extremely scary. Let's let go of your ego so there's no I left. And I think a lot of people, it's going to be really good.
Out of the room.
The I may not exist any longer after we've finished with this work.
Stock.
When you first told me there's a 50-50 chance of coming back into the body,
It's quite scary, yes.
You might not remain in the body or have a
I
body
think when I
afterwards.
first heard it, I was like, huh?
It's a great,
Yeah.
probably why sometimes some enlightenment groups aren't too big. They're not really hot. You can lose your body, not be in there, there can be no world left. It's good. Let's all try to be enlightened by the end of this hour.
We need to watch that DVD here.
Chop. He does do that sometimes. He does the chopping. You know, let go of the thoughts, let go of the body, let go of identification. Finish with it now. It's kind of powerful when he does do that as well.
And scary too.
It is scary.
Yeah.
There's great terror, which is probably why a lot of people would not be that keen. But you don't have to. That's the great thing. It's not that easy. You know, temptation can easily keep you here for you got to. I enjoy the body. I enjoy experiencing. I enjoy an eye thinking about things. And I enjoy doing things and planning things and being in charge. There's different levels, but no one, in the 12th century they said, what is it? God is a gentleman. You know, it's only if you ask. You know, he's not going to force anyone. So you can hold on to your eye for all eternity.
Sorry, what do they say? God is a
gentleman. Yeah. He's not going to force anyone into enlightenment. It's like, I like my eye. I want to keep my eye. No, thank you. No to enlightenment, non-duality, and non-existence.
Yeah, of course, we have free will.
So it's not going to happen by accident. And even if you seek it, you still might not get it. You know, so it's not that.
But for some teachers, it has happened as an
Yes,
accident.
Ramana. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just thinking. I don't know whether Byron Katie is enlightened or not, but I've seen her quite a few times, and I think definitely she's up there. I don't know where, but it more or less happened by accident.
Yes.
So obviously for some.
Yes.
It might, you know.
Oh yeah, that's correct. Yeah, Ramana just suddenly dropped down and was enlightened, and I don't know how Byron Katie. So yeah, Ramana.
I think the criteria is that they have no desires at all.
Yes.
So that's one way you can detect somebody.
Yes, that's correct. No desires. Yeah, no wants or needs. No desires. That's correct. And with Hawkins lost his startle response, even loud noises or things, he wouldn't be affected by them. Yes, sorry, that's a good point. Yeah, so yeah, for some people it just suddenly happens as well. But then that's grace. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so any other questions at this point? No? Okay. Right. Could be questions.
Very good questions, actually. Yeah.
Okay.
I like it.
Okay, so like with one of the first things I did with spiritual practice, even before, was TM meditation. And TM meditation, I don't know if some people might be familiar with it, but they've got a lot of research out there, which is was something like, I'm not sure if I'm getting the figures correct, it's something like if 2% within a village or a town meditate, the crime rate drops by, I forget, what was it, 30% or something. I'm making the figures up. And Hawkins' research also seems to bear, people when there's meditation, or I'd say just people with a high level of consciousness in the area, the level of crime, the level of fear, anger, despondency drops. Also, that I think that most people have bared that out in their own spiritual experience, just by going to spiritual groups and meeting people with a high level of consciousness. Thinkingness, negativity, addictive behaviours all start to dissipate for a while in that presence. So Muji also says, it's like people at the high level, everyone is living, what did he say? It's like, I forgot the expression he used, it's like, people are living on the consciousness of people who are at high levels of consciousness. And Hawkins actually said that, from Hawkins' research with muscle testing, I've repeated this, but for me this was the great thing of why it's good to do spiritual work. If you do, let's say people below 200 are calibrating negative, are in the negative emotions, a lot of thinking, and actually have an adverse, they're selfish, have an adverse impact on the world. But if you were to do a little bit of spiritual work and move up to 300, you counterbalance the negativity of 90,000 people below 200. So just your energy, your aura, if you like, is just filtering out and is helping to counterbalance the negativity of 90,000. If you do more spiritual work and get to 500, love, then you're counterbalancing 750,000. If you get to 600, i.e. dissolution, enlightenment, just your presence, just the presence, the absence of ego is counterbalancing 10 million people below 200. So they have profound impact on alleviating suffering in the world through their presence of beingness. And they did a bit of research in TM, which kind of gives some, and kinesiological research, and even Muji said that people are just living on that light. It's the truth. Yes. So just as was said, at this state there is no need or want for anything at this level. Everything happens spontaneously, without effort or without conscious will at that level. So I do remember from my own personal experience, this is just a different one. I remember once I was listening to a hypnosis CD on prosperity, and I remember it was like talking about prosperity, the power of thoughts, and then I went into this kind of bliss, and as I was going into bliss, suddenly it was just going to go, and the phone rang. Right, this is a true story. The phone rang suddenly as I was going. It was like a prosperity CD, and it was like, you could let go and be in peace. And then the beautiful state. And as I was going into peace, suddenly the phone rang, my mobile phone. So that was annoying because I was just about to go off into this beautiful state of peace. I was like, why is the phone ringing? And so I picked up. I had to because it was just next to me, my mobile phone. Picked it up. And it was like, at that time I was a hypnotherapist, wanting to get business. And it was, and I had put out, one of the things I'd read is like, try and get written up in a newspaper. So approach journalists and say that you can write a thing. And it was a journalist from the Metro newspaper. As I was going to go off, I was talking about, be prosperous, and then I was going off into bliss. But I couldn't go off to bliss because as soon as I was just about to go off into bliss, the phone rang. And it was a journalist from the Metro newspaper. And he said, "Oh, we'd like to do an article and we need a hypnotherapist to quote on." So, so at the time, and I had my article published with the Metro, and my name's published, and I taught them a little simple technique, a little therapy technique for letting go of things. So it's like even on a practical level. So you start to attract, when you get to the levels of love, things like manifest and happen in a lovely way. So it's like the universe takes care of you. Okay. As Hawkins was doing his work, he did have some feelings that ran for a while on his pathway doing that. Okay. So there were feelings, as he was doing spiritual work, there was a lot of feelings that came. And then after that, he had a profound inner peace and silence. So there were some feelings that were released. And the silence, it was beyond time and had no meaning, the silence he experienced. He said space did not exist in the normal way, however all things were connected. It was like there was one self expressing through all things. There was no identification with the body and no interest in it. It was obvious the real self was invisible without beginning or end. There had only been a transitory identification with the body. There was an awareness of being all things. The period of time that the body appeared to be on this earth was but a split second. And there was a timeless identity. Yeah. Okay. It was similar to my experience. Everything seemed to be intensely alive. It's also what Anna, I think, has, like the aliveness of the plant, the radiant beauty. There's just not an aliveness to everything. The body was an effect of the universe, and there had never been a doer of actions. Only the oneness existed. Some research, some of the scientists are getting nearer to the truth. But Hawkins said two of the scientists, or two of the people who are doing research in the area, whose work is quite nice, is David Bohm and Carl Pribben. Basically what they're saying is our brains are mathematically construct concrete reality by interpreting frequencies from another dimension, a realm of meaningful patterned primary reality that transcends time and space. The brain is therefore a hologram interpreting a holographic universe. This is from Hawkins' book, which is Letting Go. The ego claims to be author of action is a delusion. It is 1/10,000th of a second edit of what after what has happened. So we experience the edit. So when that edit is like the people who've got an ego are having like a filtered experience with the ego sort of distorting what is here through its filters or thought belief systems. Okay, good. So that was on peace, and
so it's true, like what you're saying, because sometimes, like when I experience that, like I don't know how to describe it. Like when you just look at things and they're so like, I can't think of words. It's so amazing. It's so like beautiful. It's like you're almost in the now, like it's there. Because I think normally when you experience day to day, it's always like a bit delayed.
Yes.
But it's only when I'm in those certain states do I actually realise that that I'm now in it. Yeah. So,
I agree. Like the states that are timeless, where there's just stunning beauty, there's like almost no awareness of the body, and it's like there's a timeless presence of beauty, for me that's very, very close. And then later when the ego starts to, when the thoughts are starting to arise and there's an identification with the thoughts, suddenly it's like there's a greater identification with the body. There seems to be tracking of time, a sense of identity, and also at the same time the whole world seems much more dimmer, or may even have negative feelings imbued in the thing. So you can almost be aware of how much just being identified with thoughts or feelings is blocking off the timeless stillness. And those moments, like I was saying, there is no need or want for anything. There is no even thinking. It's just a stunning presence that is just the reality. at that moment.